In the previous video, we talked about how to use invoke to call a procedure with passing parameter. However, in order to use the invoke to call the procedure with the passing parameter, we need to change our procedure definition. So that's why we need to talk about more in detail about the PROC directive. Before we did use the PROC directive with your procedure name. But here, let's see more detail about the syntax for the PROC directive. The PROC directive declares a procedure with an optional list of the name parameter. So that's before we didn't do that. Before we only have the procedure name with the PRC, but the PROC continue you can have, so that's why we say that's an optional. You can have the list of the named parameter. So you can contain a list of the parameter, including the parameter variable name and the data type. So that's why the syntax actually become like this. The label here is your procedure name. So PROC directive. Then you can continue with the parameter list. So the parameter list actually is the list of the parameter with your data type and the name separated with comments. So each parameter you have the syntax like this. So your parameter list includes multiple parameter name, then comma your data type. So then you just need to use the colon. So you have the parameter name, colon, then your type. Then use the comma to separate one by one. So you can see this one very similar like the local variable we define, right? So when we define the local variable, we have the variable name first, then colon, then your type. So the same thing, that's the parameter list followed by the PROC directive. So your type can be all the standard ASM type. So like your byte, word, dword, or the sign byte. So then we can see, for example, like that. So you need to be careful if you have your label PROC continue with the parameter list in one line, you don't need the comma. But if they are in separate line, so don't forget that after the PROC, you need to have the comma, then have parameter list. So your parameter list just like this. You see name, colon, type, comma, name, colon, type, comma. So then you can be in one line or multiple line. That's okay because they already have the comma followed by that. So we see the example for the add to procedure. So if you want to using the two integer and return their sum in the EAX. So remember before our add to we do what? Remember before add to we will using the EBP. We push EBP, then we move EBP with ESP value. So then you use the EBP plus 8 and the plus 12 to access your parameter list. But now you don't have to. So if you decide have your parameter list followed by the PRC, right? So then what you need to do is just after your PRC, so then that's your parameter list. Okay, so your parameter list, we have two parameter lists. Remember, we have the first value and the second value. So we have that they are both dword. So now what you need to do is you just need to move your the val1 to EAX. So you add val2 to EAX. Then you return back. So then after you return, your EAX contain the sum of your two parameters. So on the other hand, if you really compare this add to version from the previous version, do you still need to remember the previous version? So let me quickly show you what's your previous version for your add to. So when you have your add to in the previous version, remember that's how we do. You have EBP push into the stack. So then you have ESP move to EBP. So then we need to use EBP to access the first parameter and the second parameter. So even afterward, you have EAX with the value. You need to pop EBP, then return with 8. That's because before we don't have parameter list. But now after we understand how to add the parameter list after the PRC, so then we have the new version for our add2. So then you see your add2 will have the 2 parameter. So to access that parameter, you just need to using the variable name. So after you use the parameter, normal push pop EBP, normal reset your EBP. So your return, you don't need the return offset, you just return. So that's one example. We see how we have the parameter list follow with the PROC. So after you have that, you don't need to manually to push and pop EBP. But that's the more example how you can have your parameter list. So these two, you can see the parameter list, actually we passing by value. We just access that value when we're using the invoke. But then actually your parameter list can be many different ways, right? They can be the passing by value, but they also can be reference. So that's why we see, do you remember we have the field array from your lab exercise? So when you field array, remember we need to have the array location. We need to know what the data you want to fill. So we need to know the array size. So that's why we just say now, for example, the field array procedure, we want to pass in the parameter. When we pass in the parameter, the first one just passing me a byte array. So then give me the value I want to fill. Since that's a byte array, the single value to fill that array will be the byte. So then tell me how many elements in the array. So that's why you see after your field array PROC, you have 3 parameters. So the first one, the P array, actually is a location, right? So that's the address for the array. So then here actually you give them the PTR byte. So the PTR actually means you give me passing by the reference, but then actually I read each byte one by one. So that's how you can pass in the array pointer. So then here, continue, you fill value, right? So because you are a byte array, so the fill value should be 1 byte. So then tell me how many elements in the array. So then we just using the D word. So that's why later we can using this D word for the ECX. So again, since you have those parameter list, when you implement your procedure, so the first one you see normal push and pop EBP, we just using the value we have here. So then we will pass in the array size to the ECX. So then the P array will be a location. So then we move to ESI. So then the field value will be the AL, 1 byte. So we just need to have a loop to overwrite AL from the ESI. So we increment ESI. So then we finish. So that's the other example about the PROC. So we quickly see more PROC example. So for example, swap. So remember in C++, when we want to swap 2 value in the 2 reference location, so that's why you see you have X and Y. So then actually they are all passing by reference. So that's why you just need to have the, if that's the reference, you give them the PTR to let them know that's a reference. But reference for what kind of data type? So that's the double word. So the next example we will show you actually is the read file procedure. So sometimes when you want to read from a file, right? So actually in Irvine 32 library, we do have a read file procedure. So you just need to pass in your file name. So then they can read the file. So you see here, how should we pass in the file name? Right, so the file name actually should be a string. So actually string is a byte array. So that's why you see here, we will only have 1 parameter we will pass. So that's the name of the file. But sometimes your procedure, remember, before we told you the procedure, we can have the parameter now after the PROC directive. But sometimes in your procedure, we also have the local variable we need to do. So the next example, we just want you to show you the syntax. For example, your read file procedure, you have a local variable called file handle. So then actually this one is the D word. So if you have any local variable, then you just need to continue after your parameter list. So then you just using your local directive. So then you have your local variable list. But more than that, right? Did you remember before we told you your PRC afterward, if you have any regex, you want to use the uses keyword to let the procedure to push and pop the regex. So now contain everything. How should we have the order? So that's why we have the complete the order with that. So remember before we talked about if you have any regex, you want to be pushed and pop automatically by the procedure. After the PROC directive, we're using the uses. So actually this uses keyword will be before your parameter list. So that's why here we didn't show you how to implement the read file procedure. We just told you actually read file procedure, they will receive a byte pointer to the file name. And they have a local double words variable called file handle. And they have to save 2 registers in the stack, that's EAX, EBX. So with all those information we have, so how should we do that in the prototype, in the procedure header? So that's why you will see here. According to have your procedure name first, then the PROC directive. So if you have regex, you do the uses first with the regex. Okay, so then it's better you do the, since you do the new line, you have the comma here. So after the comma, right, you have your parameter list one by one. So here, since we only have one, so then we have the byte pointer. So then after your parameter list, then you have your local variable. Okay, so then you see now this procedure, they have everything just after your PROC directive. So after you have parameter list, your local variable, you no longer need to worry about the EBP. So the EBP actually can be handled automatically by the procedure. So then afterward, just need to continue to do your content, how you want to process your file, how you want to read your file. So then at the end, you just simply return. So that's the procedure. Complete use the PROC directive with your parameter list. So then you can use the invoke to call the procedure name with the parameter list. But we are not done yet. After you use the PROC directive, follow with your parameter list, right? But here, since you use the invoke, then we have the other one we call the PROTO directive. So this PROTO directive actually is kind of like the prototype for the procedure in like C++ function. So if you want to use the invoke and you have your PROC directive with the parameter list, they require to have a prototype if you don't have procedure definition before you invoke that. So then your prototype, just like earlier we show you, they have the label is procedure name, then the prototype, proto keyword, then your parameter list. So this situation is if you have your procedure definition after your invoke directive, so then they need to have proto to let the compiler know. So they look like this. For example, I call my sub procedure here. Okay, but the definition is afterward. So then we need to have my sub proto before the being invoked. But this one, they don't have any parameter. So the same thing, if you have parameter, you just have your procedure name, proto, comma, so then your parameter list. So the same thing, your variable name, colon, data type.